Welcome back. I'm Errol Lewis, and we are bringing you a debate in the race for Manhattan District Attorney. Early voting kicks off tomorrow, and while all eyes are on the race for mayor, there are many other important contests on your ballot, including this one. Manhattan voters will be deciding on a district attorney, a key office that plays a major role in criminal justice policy throughout the borough, at a time in which prosecutors' offices across the country have become highly politicized. Tonight, we are joined by the three candidates on your ballot. The current Manhattan District Attorney, Alvin Bragg, is seeking re-election. He is being challenged by Republican candidate Maron, who worked as a public defender for more than 20 years, and by independent candidate Diana Florence, who worked in the Manhattan District Attorney's office for 25 years. The rules that you see on your screen right now have been agreed to by the candidates. Each will have 60 seconds for an opening argument, and then answers to my questions will generally be limited to 60 seconds, with 30 seconds allowed for rebuttals at my discretion. There will also be both a cross-examination round and a lightning round. You can also see this full debate on ny1.com or the Spectrum News app at any time, and you can join the conversation using the hashtag NY1Debate. We're going to begin with opening statements. The order for tonight's opening statements was determined by a random drawing. Maud Maron, you get to go first. Good evening.
Good evening, Errol. Thank you for having me. Good afternoon. Good evening, New Yorkers. Thank you very much for listening. And as Errol said, this is an important debate. I'm running for Manhattan District Attorney because our city deserves better than the soft on crime policies that we've had from Alvin Bragg. Under Bragg's tenure, the case dismissal rate has soared to over 60%, while the conviction rate has dropped to 35%. Last month, New York One reported that subway assaults are up since before COVID, 62.5%. And victims are re-victimized when the district attorney's office doesn't prosecute the assailants. I am tough enough to change all of that. I stood up for my clients in criminal court, and I have stood up to the bad ideas and failed policies of New York City and New York State's elite that make us less safe. Policies like cashless bail. We need better policies, and we need a district attorney who will implement those better policies going forward. My name's Maud Maron, and I'm asking for your vote on November 4th.
Okay, thanks very much. Next is Diana Florence. Good evening.
Good evening, Errol. Tonight I want to talk about what's really happening in Alvin Bragg's Manhattan. Women aren't safe, violent offenders walk free, and victims are completely forgotten. Simply put, Alvin Bragg has utterly failed to do his job, and New Yorkers are paying the price. Take the case of Justin Washington, who in 2022 was accused of raping his teenage relative. Alvin Bragg gave him a 30-day plea deal, and before he could spend one moment in jail, weeks later, Mr. Washington went to the Bronx and assaulted 5 more New Yorkers sexually. Alvin Bragg has failed at his job, simply. There is no safety. There are convictions that are down, and violent crime is up. I'm Diana Florence. I'm running for Manhattan DA because I have 25 years of experience, and I have more experience than anyone in this race. I'm asking for your vote on November 4th.
Thank you. And Mr. Bragg, good evening.
Good evening, Errol. Good evening, New Yorkers. 4 years ago, when I took office in the middle of COVID, nationwide crime was spiking. 4 years later now, crime is down in Manhattan, including shootings down 66% and homicides down 48%. How do we get here? Strategic prosecutions and investments in communities. Shoplifting prosecutions are up, gun prosecutions are up, and hate crime prosecutions are up. And we've invested nearly $10 million in mental health interventions. All of this work is deeply personal to me. Growing up in Harlem, I had a semi-automatic weapon at my head, a knife at my neck, and a homicide victim on my doorstep, leading me to focus on public safety for my entire career as a federal prosecutor and as chief deputy in the Attorney General's office. As a result, I've earned the support of every single elected official in Manhattan, and what's more, unions representing hundreds of thousands of hardworking New Yorkers. I hope to earn your support as well.
Okay, thank you very much, candidates. As we heard from your opening statements, you all have very different views of where things stand. And I was looking at some of the statistics. I saw that homicides were down 20% and 45%, and shootings were down 45% in Manhattan last year. However, felony assaults citywide remain near 25-year highs. There are different interpretations of these numbers, And I wanted to get from each of you your sense of where things are trending and what you would do about it as DA. And we'll start with you, Ms. Florence.
Yeah, well, I mean, the numbers to me don't really tell the story. For example, we know half the story. Alvin Bragg took down his dashboard a year ago, which told us what the conviction rates were. And we know that they're plummeting. They're lower than they ever were. To me, we have a guy named David Mazariegos who was let out by Alvin Bragg and then just a bit later killed someone in Brooklyn. That's not acceptable. We need to do better. You need a DA who has prosecuted crime. I've prosecuted every type of crime imaginable, from violent crimes to major felony frauds. We need a DA that understands that. Alvin Bragg has not done this work. He overstates his record of what he did as a prosecutor. He's never been a penal law prosecutor. No one on the stage has except me. I understand what it's like to talk to victims, to sit with them, to work with juries. I understand this work, and as your DA, I promise that safety will be paramount.
Well, tell me a little more. I mean, I'll stop you if you go too deep into the weeds, but what would you change in the office to improve outcomes in the cases that you're describing?
Well, I would do something called the DA ComStat. And that would be just, we know ComStat that monthly the police department works with all of their precincts. We would have DA supervisors working with police, looking at cases, making sure if their arrests are not being handled appropriately, we do it. If we've messed it up, we make sure we do postmortems. I also believe we have to do a repeat offenders task force. We cannot let repeat offenders do what David Mazariegos did, or Justin Washington, or so many others. It's very important that the DA work with the police. And Alvin Bragg has lost the trust of police. I will bring that back.
Okay, let me ask you for a rebuttal and your own answer to this, Mr. Bragg.
Sure, I'd just like to go back to the question with the data. The data I gave at the beginning on shootings being down goes all the way back to we're at pre-pandemic levels on shootings. And you don't have to take my word for it. You look at the NYPD data. The police commissioner, the mayor, had a availability 3 weeks ago, and they said transit crime the last several months at historic lows, and 7 quarters in a row of declining crime. Manhattan's a big piece of that puzzle. Now, specifically on felony assaults, this is an area where there are 2 things we've been focused on. The first is discovery reform. As I've talked about with your viewers before, the discovery laws, which were changed before I went into office, led to 20,000 more dismissals citywide. I went to Albany and got that law changed so that there'll be fewer dismissals. And I'm happy to go into more detail about what that law entails. But it went into effect in August, and we're already starting to see the change in the courtroom, and we'll begin to see it on the street. And I would also add the Support Act. We got the Support Act passed last session, which speaks to mental health and mental health interventions for people who are doing assaults that are not felonies, which by operation of law, the law requires if you're found not fit by a judge, that your case is dismissed if it's a misdemeanor case. We went to Albany and put scaffolding and support. We'll be back in Albany because the bill wasn't funded at the level we want to.
Let me then just ask you, in summary, how would you summarize where things are as far as criminal justice in the borough? How should people be thinking about this? Some crime categories are down, some are at historic lows, others remain stubbornly high.
So I would think about it as I came in office and we focused on particularly violent crime. Shootings, based upon my experiences, what I was particularly hearing in the upper parts of the borough and lower east side, we focused there. So that's why you have us back down to pre-pandemic levels there. We focused on homicides. Those were the most pressing. We also focused on sexual assaults and rebooted and created a standalone division there. For quality of life, we've also focused on through mental health interventions. But that's going forward, that's where we need more. We put $9 million of interventions in, of people connecting with those in distress, either before they have a case or immediately after. We need to amplify that.
We will definitely talk about quality of life. Ms. Maron, what's your sense of public safety in the borough, and what would you do about it as DA?
We are less safe than we were before Alvin Bragg took office. And I've said it before and I'll say it here. The first thing I would do is rip up Alvin Bragg's day 1 memo, because it is a memo from a prosecutor talking about all the ways in which he will not prosecute crime in this city. There's such a thing as prosecutorial discretion, and it's important and it should be used wisely on a case-by-case basis. What Alvin Bragg did when he came in is say there's whole categories of crimes that I'm not going to prosecute. That's not up to Alvin Bragg. He doesn't get to say, I don't want to prosecute resisting arrest. It's in our penal law, it's passed by the legislature, and it's a crime that should be prosecuted by the prosecutor. Alvin Bragg said transit crime is down. That's true, but felony assault on the subway is up. The serious crime, the sort of crime that makes people afraid to take the subway, is up. As I mentioned, up 62.5% since pre-pandemic level. That's reporting by New York One. The reality is, I'm very happy that there are fewer gun homicides in our city, as any person would be, but we have an increase in sexual assault cases, and that is particularly worrisome for women. We have to get back to prosecuting all of the crimes that Alvin Bragg doesn't want to prosecute, because we know from police CompStat initiatives before that prosecuting quality of life crimes not only helps solve the quality of life issues, it also brings down the more serious major felonies.
So say a little more. If you were successful, in 70 days you'd be sworn in as the new prosecutor. What would you do then?
I would work with the NYPD. Because we have seen in the past that NYPD focusing on the high crime neighborhoods specifically and arresting all of the crimes, the misdemeanor crimes, the felony crimes, the quality of life crimes, the serious felony crimes, brings down all categories of crime. It brings down the higher levels of crime when you do across-the-board policing. Proactive policing saves lives, and it brings it down. I would make sure that every ADA working in that office knows that the old rules, the day one memo rules of not prosecuting crimes, are no longer going to be followed in the office.
Okay.
The day one memo was overwritten within days. We talk about prosecutor discretion. I've been a prosecutor starting in 2003, federal prosecutor, state prosecutor, and we are doing those cases. We did 40,000 cases, give or take, last year, 6,400 shoplifting cases. So the suggestion that we're not prosecuting is just not rooted in the data, and if my opponents don't want to believe me, I point them back to the statements by the police department on where crime actually is.
Well, let me start you. You can start us off on the next question, Mr. Bragg. New Yorkers continue to debate, including tonight, how, when, and whether misdemeanor offenses like fare evasion, shoplifting, retail theft, public inebriation should be prosecuted. 4 years ago, and I was here for that debate, as a couple of you were, Manhattan voters made clear that they wanted a less harsh approach to these so-called quality of life offenses. Are we saying now, is it time for a course correction on this approach? And if so, where do you think stricter enforcement might be needed today? We'll start with you, Mr. Bragg.
We are doing the cases and assessing them on an individual basis. So let's take the shoplifting docket, 6,500 cases last year. We focused on the recidivism. When I came into office, 18% of those arrested for shoplifting accounted for 45% of the arrests. So we looked at those cases, we have processed those aggressively. That makes sense. There are other people who maybe their first time, their second time, we have problem-solving courts, mental health court, drug diversion. So we use them where appropriate. So it is a case-specific, individual-specific inquiry, which we're doing. And I would just point to 7 quarters in a row of declining crime. Manhattan's a big piece of that puzzle. Transit crime, down to historic lows, according to the New York Police Department.
And Ms. Florence, I mean, you were in the race 4 years ago, and maybe your memory is different from mine, but I thought the voters said fairly clearly that they wanted to dial back on the prosecution of some of these lower level quality of life offenses. And so the same question for you. Are you suggesting that, did they get it wrong? Do we need a course correction? Where do things stand?
Well, 4 years ago when I stood in my Zoom square, I said that soda is not free and shoplifting must be prosecuted. And I don't know where Mr. Bragg gets his numbers, because the fact is, if you go to any Duane Reade, everything is locked up. And all of us, every New Yorker has seen the rows of people going in and out of stores, stealing things. This is still a major problem. And if it were, then the toothpaste would be free again. It's not free because Alvin Bragg has failed to prosecute these crimes. And let me be clear about something. This is not about diversion, because Alvin Bragg, in his day one memo, which yes, he says he backed off of, but you know what? It's still on the website. And what happens now is when someone is arrested for shoplifting, they get immediately diverted. They don't get a criminal record. And if they don't live up to what they're promised, whatever that sentence is, a treatment program, a fine, a community service, there is no enforcement. And that's why we have a recidivism problem in this city, and particularly in Manhattan DA's office. We need to get back to basics. I was in the office under Morgenthau. We certainly were not always sending people a year in jail for shoplifting a tube of toothpaste. We can enforce the law. It is not about diversion, it is about prosecution, which is his job, and he has failed at.
Well, let me ask you this. I mean, when it comes to retail theft, I mean, part of the discussion 4 years ago, part of the problem today, to this day, is how much in the way of prosecutorial resources do you want to devote to somebody stealing a $5 bottle of shampoo? And I guess related to that is, if there actually is a very large retail theft ring, of which the actual shoplifter is only part of a larger criminal enterprise, how do you take that apart?
Well, first of all, I have the most experience conducting large-scale investigations. First off. Second off, when someone is repeatedly going back to a specific institution, you can give them something called a trespass notice. And that means that you can prosecute those cases as felonies. This is not new. I think Alvin Bragg has recently done this, but I'm going to tell you back in the 90s we used to do that. That was pulled back until Alvin Bragg was called out on the carpet for failing to prosecute crime accordingly. When I'm DA, if you have recidivists, they are going to be prosecuted for burglaries. That's what happens when you give a trespass affidavit after someone has repeatedly patronized one store.
Okay, I'll let you respond, and then we'll get Maron in as well.
We've spent, myself personally, at Midtown with retailers, training them on trespass affidavits. So we're doing the work that Ms. Florence is talking about, and she misrepresents my record. She knows I've been a prosecutor since 2003. I've done some of the most complex cases. I've done the most complex money laundering case done in this region in a generation. So my experience speaks for itself. And you raise a really good point, Errol. Following the money. We're doing that on shoplifting. In addition to focusing on the recidivist day in and day out, we have a trial that's going to start in about a month. A brother-sister tandem, we allege that they engaged in $1 million worth of fencing. So we follow where the people went who were shoplifting. We looked at that, and that case is going to go to trial. And interestingly, Errol, when we brought that case, we had another investigation of another ring. The deterrent effect of bringing that case, they packed up and left town just because we brought the case. So doing that work, doing the day in and day out recidivist work is important. Okay. Following the money, which I have deep expertise.
Did they leave town altogether or just your borough?
They left the state.
Okay, good enough. Ms. Maron.
I just want to say that, DA Bragg is arguing that that the numbers support him. Then why not put the numbers back up on the website? You took down the dashboard that has conviction rates and all of the related information over 18 months ago, and it hasn't gone back up. If someone's proud of the work that they've accomplished and they want the voters that voted for you and the people who have to live under your policies to know about it, put it back up on the website so that we can all see it. It's not there because it doesn't support the gaslighting that Alvin Bragg is doing here tonight, trying to tell us all that we're safer than we are when we know and can see with our own eyes that we're not. To Diana Florence's point, if you can't go into a Duane Reade and get a shampoo or a deodorant or a toothpaste without calling someone to unlock it for you, it means the recidivist criminals are the ones who are being catered to and not the hard law-abiding, hard-working people of Manhattan.
Yeah, what would you say, though, Ms. Maron, to the idea that you don't necessarily want to use an outsized amount of prosecutorial resources on low-level theft, which in the end is at least partly the responsibility of the establishment itself?
I worked in the courthouse as a legal aid lawyer and as a public defender when Robert Morgenthau was the DA in the office. They went very hard against shoplifting, and I worked very hard to defend my clients. And I, like Diana, I tried many cases in 100 Center Street, something that Alvin Bragg has never done. The reality is nobody ever went to jail for stealing a shampoo bottle the first time. You get an ACD, you get a disorderly conduct, you get diversion programs, as is appropriate for a first-time shoplifter. But when you've done it 93 times and you're making it hard for the store to be able to keep their doors open and function, then you need a more severe penalty.
And we're doing those cases. 6,500 shoplifting cases last year, asking for bail and getting it under the new bail statute under harm. We're doing the work that they're talking about. And the data is clear. They just don't like where it is. The state criminal division and the NYPD data make clear prosecutions are up and crime, particularly violent crime, is down. Okay,
candidates, stand by. We're going to take a short break. We'll hear more from these candidates for Manhattan District Attorney when we come back. Stay with us. Welcome back to Inside City Hall, where we are continuing the debate in the race for Manhattan District Attorney. We're going to have the cross-examination section now, where each candidate will get the chance to ask one question of one other candidate. We'll start with you, Maron.
Just want to say, as a former defense lawyer, this is not proper form of cross-examination, but I'm going to give a good question anyway. And my question is to District Attorney Bragg. Jose Alba is a man a Dominican-American man, in Harlem who had to fight for his life in a bodega that he was working in. Brian Chin is a Chinese-American father who was attacked by a vagrant on the street and had to fight to defend himself. Both of those men you arrested and prosecuted wrongfully, and it wasn't until public outcry that you pulled back those prosecutions after you had put those men through the system and put them through being prosecuted. Will you apologize to Jose Alba and to Brian Chin and the other innocent victims of crime who you have wrongfully prosecuted?
So those cases are sealed, so I won't go into detail, but I'm not going to apologize for rigorous homicide investigation. When someone is, I don't want to be too graphic here, but when someone is dead on the ground or on the floor in Manhattan, and the NYPD arrests that person and brings them to my office, and you both know the complaint room well and the seasoned prosecutors, we rigorously assess the facts, we look at the law, and we do an investigation. And that doesn't always line up with the media cycle. That's not our role. Our role is to analyze the facts and the law. That's what we do. And the way that we've done it has led to the 46% reduction in homicides I mentioned. So the rigor and the fidelity to the application of law to the facts and that process is not something that I'm going to apologize for. In fact, I'm proud of it. I'm proud of the results that we've gotten.
Okay. Next is for you, Ms. Florence.
Thank you, Errol. My question is also for Mr. Bragg. Mr. Bragg, as I mentioned in my opening, Justin Washington was accused of raping in the first degree his teenage relative. And you reduced that case to coercion and gave him a 30-day sentence. And then, just weeks later, before he served 1 day of that sentence, he went to the Bronx and he sexually assaulted 5 other people. What do you say to those 5 New Yorkers and all of us about giving a sweetheart deal that failed to keep us safe?
And again, I know you know the ethics rules. I'm not going to comment on that case, but what I can say, some of these arguments were made by your campaign publicly, and I was really humbled to see Marissa Hochstetter, a leading voice and a survivor, someone who had been a critic of the Manhattan DA's office before I assumed this role, speak out about the things that we're doing in support of sexual assault survivors. Creating a standalone Special Victims Division with training and expertise, increasing our survivor services. Our crisis services are up 250%. Bringing in the voices of survivors through our Survivors Network, listening to them, having a Special Victims Division Advisory Council where those who work directly with survivors and victims, and then look at the cases we're bringing. I mean, just last week, brought a prosecution of a prominent doctor for a rape that was done. You see the power asymmetry in that case. So that's the work we're doing.
Okay, thank you. And your turn, Mr. Bragg.
Sure, and I'm going to talk about hate crimes. I'm proud of what we've done, the 25% increase in hate crime prosecutions, the outreach we've done to various communities, expanding the unit from 2 ADAs to about 15. And my question to you, and I'm just repeating what others have said, you had colleagues of yours at Legal Aid who called you racist. You had commentators and community leaders, particularly downtown, who called you homophobic. And so my question is how can you capably lead the hate crimes unit with that type of occurrences having happened?
Mm-hmm. Ad hominem attacks happen all the time in New York City politics. That label of racist that I got way back when was for standing up for high quality public school education. I send all 4 of my children to public school. You have been lucky to have some of the greatest education institutions in your background. Going to private school in New York, you send your children to private school, that's wonderful. I believe in school choice. But the fact is, as a public school mom, I spent a lot of years fighting very hard for excellent public school education. And if you think defending gifted and talented programs or defending the SHSAT to get into specialized high school is racist, well, then you agree with my critics. But if you know better, and I think you do, that it is absolutely an incredibly important thing for public school parents to stand up for their children and for their education, then you'll know that that accusation is ridiculous. Homophobic, give me a break. I stand up for gay kids all the time. I think you meant transphobic. Knowing the difference between a man and a woman is not transphobic, and standing up for gay kids who have the right to reach adulthood whole and safe is not any kind of phobic.
Okay, thank you, candidates. I want to move on to something that just happened a few days ago, and it's kind of a 2-part question. Federal agents conducted a raid on Canal Street, searching for undocumented New Yorkers while also disrupting a marketplace that we all know is notorious for selling counterfeit knockoffs of luxury goods. So I guess it's a two-part question. Should it have been the job of local law enforcement to disrupt that illegal vending before ICE arrived? And then sort of the larger question, there's at least one member of Congress who has called for the prosecution of federal agents who engage in unlawful conduct in the course of doing these raids. If you agree, would you prosecute such cases if they came to your office? And I wanted to start with you, Mr. Bragg.
What we've seen, recently, in the last couple of days, but even more broadly, is anathema to public safety. It erodes and undermines public safety. I've been doing this since 2003, notwithstanding what others said. I've done a lot of it, and the foundation is community trust. I grew up in a precinct that had the most violence historically in Manhattan. I go back to that precinct, I talk to my fellow parishioners. I've gotten trust, which just makes people come forward. We've had cases where a witness has been deported mid-case. That means there's no accountability for the defendant, and it means that the survivor doesn't have her day in court. So this is eroding and could push back on the public safety gains we've gotten. So it's part of the reason I joined with Brooklyn District Attorney Eric Gonzalez. We filed a friend of the court brief in a case really highlighting how we need to stand up for our state law that protects our courthouses, since ICE shouldn't be in them. And we're certainly going to be looking at all the available options under the law. Well,
let me sharpen the question a little bit. If it came to your attention that ICE agents or other federal law enforcement were violating local statutes, would your office intervene?
It is something that we are looking at. We saw Congressman Goldman and others' letters. It is procedurally complicated and substantively complicated, sort of at the intersection of my experience. My opponents have noted my federal experience, practice in the Southern District. A case like that would likely be brought there under the procedure laws, but under a local law. So it's something that we are looking at. And like all the work we do, it's going to be case specific and based upon specific conduct. But make no doubt, like what is happening has the potential to significantly erode the trust that we've earned, in particularly in communities that have not historically come forward to law enforcement. We've made great strides there.
Okay, Ms. Florence.
Those are a lot of talking points. And once again, Mr. Bragg is distorting his record. He didn't try any cases by himself in the Southern District. He has never tried, as Ms. Maron said, a case in 100 Center Street or 111 or even 80 Center Street. The fact of the matter is I'm the only one here who has prosecuted cases on behalf of undocumented immigrants. I brought a landmark and historic case against a company who killed a worker just a few blocks from here. So I understand that ICE agents have no place in our courthouse, and we can use due process and have the cases work, just like we did under Morgenthau. Once the cases are done, if the defendant is in fact an undocumented person, then they can be deported. That's how we did it under Morgenthau. But what you just heard out of Mr. Bragg is his reluctance to condemn some of the people that he endorsed, that he proudly said that he endorsed. But the fact is, I'm not here because I'm a politician. That's a politician. I am a prosecutor, and I will prosecute every case without fear or favor. Those are Morgenthau's words, not his.
Okay, so now in this case, which is no longer a hypothetical case, of ICE agents deciding to go out and do enforcement on their own on the streets of Manhattan, what would your office do?
Nobody is above the law. Not a prosecutor, not a police officer, and not an ICE agent. If they violate local statutes, I will not have a blanket policy like Mr. Bragg did in his memo saying that these things can't be crimes. I'm going to look at that case. I'm going to investigate it. I will bring it before the grand jury if necessary, and we will have a full and fulsome hearing on what happened. And then the voters and the grand jurors in this particular case will decide what's appropriate.
Okay. My response is about my experience, because Ms. Florence, I tried a number of cases in the Southern District of New York where cases are co-counseled. So yes, I had a trial partner. In fact, that's a practice I'm trying to bring to the Manhattan District Attorney's Office, because I believe it's best practice to have two prosecutors working on cases. And I tried some of the most complicated cases, and in fact, cases involving significant immigration issues of witnesses. So I just wanted to make that clear. And on going where the facts take us, you talk about my experience throughout my office, and some of these are cases I directly did, some I oversaw, prosecuted 2 mayors, a Senate Majority Leader, a council member, an FBI agent, without regard to their political party. It was a Democrat, a Republican, an independent. And yes, it may have been Mr. Morgenthau. It's actually the New York Times that first said without fear or favor. But that's how I comported myself, without fear.
I think there was an ex-president in there too. Ms. Maron.
I noticed that Mr. Bragg skipped that one when he was running through the politicians that he prosecuted. I will say with regard to the ICE raids on Canal Street, that's spitting distance from where I lived. I walked through the tail end of it last night. The fact is, we wouldn't have to even ask a question about federal officers coming into our city if Alvin Bragg was doing the job that Bob Morgenthau used to do to prosecute the crimes that make our streets unsafe to walk down. No one's afraid of someone selling a counterfeit Gucci purse, but the fact of the matter is those unlicensed general vending groups and cartels that we're developing, we're also selling drugs, and we're also developing more and more criminality. We need a prosecutor who will prosecute all the crimes on the books so that becomes unnecessary. I do want to emphasize one thing. I've worked in 100 Center Street for years, and we absolutely need undocumented immigrants to be able to report when they are victims of crime and to be witnesses to crime, because otherwise you create a class of people who can be abused. Yes, immigration law can be enforced in other parts of the city, but we absolutely need undocumented people to be able to be in our courtrooms both as complaining witnesses and as witnesses.
And so again, the same hypothetical. If men in masks are snatching people off the streets of Manhattan, there seems to be a general outcry and even allegations of illegal conduct. What would your office do?
Men in masks were snatching people, I would absolutely prosecute because that's illegal. But federal officers engaging in lawful federal conduct is something different.
Okay. Candidates, let's move on and talk about white-collar crime. Manhattan continues to be a place where we see corporate fraud, we see real estate fraud, we see various industries, including the construction industry, where there is misconduct, campaign finance violations, and other white-collar crimes. What would your approach be to those kinds of crimes as district attorney? We'll start with you, Ms. Maron.
I think what we've seen out of Alvin Bragg when we go back to political prosecutions is too little focus on corruption cases and too much focus on prosecuting political enemies. What we need is, we keep mentioning Robert Morgenthau, but Robert Morgenthau ran an office where he robustly prosecuted and did long-term white-collar investigations to root out corruption in our city. That's the high watermark for how that office was run. That's what we should return to. And we absolutely need to have more corruption investigation, more rackets investigation out of the Manhattan District Attorney's Office.
Are you suggesting that Mr. Bragg is prosecuting political enemies and not other people?
No, I'm saying that his focus should be on prosecuting all of the crimes that are in the penal law that are happening and occurring in our district, and we should have robust white-collar enforcement. I don't think the Attorney General's office or the District Attorney's office should ever be used as a political cudgel in political fights because it deprives us as Manhattanites and New Yorkers of the safety that we deserve.
Okay, Ms. Florence.
You know, after 9/11, I prosecuted major fraudsters who stole hundreds of thousands of dollars from the charities. Then I did major wiretaps and created a construction fraud task force that Alvin Bragg himself has actually praised and kept the model. But here's the thing, he is absolutely, Ms. Maron is right, he has backed off. Because, for example, just one case of mine was a $6 million wage theft. He touted in one of his commercials only $1 million. Over 4 years, that is a drop in the bucket of what New Yorkers, working people, have stolen from them. I wrote a bill that became law that made wage theft a theft, not a theft of services like Alvin Bragg would have done in the Attorney General's office. His work on this has been substandard, and that's because he only has that minimal experience as a civil prosecutor, which is not criminal, in the Attorney General, and yes, minimal, a few years in the Southern District where he carried the briefcase of the lead prosecutors in those trials. I have done this work. Maron has prosecuted, has done trials. Alvin Bragg is distorting his record. If you want a prosecutor who is going to prosecute both violent crime, both street crime, and complex fraud, you need someone who has done that work. I am that person. I've done this work for 25 years, and if I am honored enough to be elected, I will make that a priority on day one.
Okay.
I've done some of the most complicated cases, criminal cases, trials before the federal bench in the recent history of this city. I mean, the record speaks for itself on that. 3 points. One, on public corruption, is actually a bit rich, I think. We've done a lot in public corruption. Locally, we've You have ongoing prosecutions against a former commissioner, a former high-ranking official in City Hall, and we've done a lot. I think this gets not noticed as much on public funds, people taking money from public funds. Second, we're focusing a lot on using our white-collar tools to address street crimes. Just yesterday, I was in court watching the sentencing for someone who ran a drug ring using the dark web online. We're doing a lot more of that, looking at the intersection of white-collar and street crimes. And third, we're really looking at power asymmetry. So we started a tenant unit. Just in the last 3 weeks, we've had 4 cases, a deed theft, someone posing as a rental broker, and 2 other cases one involving tenant harassment and another involving someone misrepresenting who they were. And look, Ms. Florence is right. The construction for our unit does great work. I expanded it, but where she's wrong is, and I've done multi-million-dollar cases, and so I understand the focus there, but we have done smaller dollar cases. Let me just tell you about someone who came to my office. He was a worker, had been at Grimaldi's Pizza. He was not only not paid his wages, but he was told he didn't belong here because he had a USA hat on. That case was probably about, I think, $25,000 all told. One of the proudest days for me was when that person felt comfortable coming to my office and getting his back pay and wearing that USA hat. So yes, we have done smaller dollar cases in addition to bigger ones, but they're important. They're important to those individual victims, and they're important to send a signal to industry.
Okay. We've only got a few minutes left, candidates. I wanted to make sure we touch on some hot button issues, including the state legislature, which in recent years has changed the laws that govern the setting of bail, the procedures and deadlines for gathering and sharing evidence before trial. That's discovery reform is usually the shorthand for that, and raising the age at which teenage suspects will be charged as adults. Some critics have said that these reforms have eroded public safety. The Manhattan District Attorney would have a prominent voice in trying to make an argument if reforms are needed. So if you are the Manhattan District Attorney in January, how would you approach these kind of questions? Which laws do you think need changing, and what would you do? And we'll start with you, Ms. Florence.
Well, we've got to get back to discretion for judges in bail cases. And it's interesting because Alvin Bragg has been there for 4 years, and he is very proud of his Southern District background. And he knows there's a dangerousness standard there for bail. He has not gone to Albany and advocated for that. If you're going to take away discretion from judges, you need to put a dangerousness standard back in. That is something that I didn't think we needed 4 years ago. I'll say that, because we never had it. But we also had discretion. So I will, as I've done as a middle manager prosecutor, not as the DA, I passed 2 bills. I closed loopholes with the Department of Building after they were falsifying the strength of the concrete at the World Trade Center. I understand that you don't have to choose. You can do both the cases, and you can advocate in Albany. And when we have the rules that we have, right? And Alvin Bragg has lived with those, and he's been silent up until this spring. What you can do is you can find a workarounds. I know workarounds because I did this work. I understand it when I did domestic violence cases, and the woman was scared to do it. We went after bail jumping. You can talk to other boroughs and find out when someone violates the terms of their bail. You go back to the judge here in Manhattan. These are things you do when you know the law.
Okay, Mr. Bragg.
I've used my voice and used it quite well. This goes back to the beginning when I talked about the broad support. I went with the broad support with talked to other Manhattan electeds, created a coalition, went up with other prosecutors as a unified group, and we got the discovery law changed. I mean, there were 20,000 more dismissals citywide flowing from the discovery law. It was driving recidivism. And so that kind of coalition building, going up, working with the governor, working with the legislature, and getting the law changed. I've already seen, it went into effect in early August, Errol. We've already seen the dismissals change. We're litigating this every day. So I've done it before. We'll do it again. We'll be back. We got the Support Act passed last year, which was a mental health bill, but it wasn't funded at a full level. So we'll be back doing that. And as we see other issues, we'll go back. We have a bill on trafficking to get the statute of limitations extended, because we have cases where we have survivors who need that intervention. And then we also have a bill on ghost guns. It's not illegal to manufacture ghost guns here. I'm a national leader on that issue, having just been appointed head of the Prosecutors Against Gun Violence, a nationwide independent prosecutors group.
Okay. Ms. Maron.
So there are 4 laws that changed in Albany, in groups, sets of laws that changed: the cashless bail, what you categorized as discovery reform, raise the age, and less is more. New Yorkers in general, and certainly people in Manhattan, are very familiar with cashless bail because they understand what happens when somebody assaults them or breaks into their car or steals things from their store, that person is right back out on the street again. They can see it with their own eyes, and they understand that's what's happening. Alvin Bragg says he's going to use his voice, but where was he when Police Commissioner Tisch went to Albany and said, we have to change cashless bail, that this is tying the hands of the NYPD in order to be able to do their job? He's quite silent when it comes to that. Bragging about an unfunded support act doesn't do anything. You can pass all sorts of things in Albany. If there's no money for it, nothing changes. So saying that you support nice, feel-good mental health acts that are unfunded and then don't get anything done doesn't do anything about cashless bail, which is the most significant change that we've had in our city. And we need a Manhattan district attorney who will join the police commissioner. And hopefully, if we have a Mayor Mamdani, which is what looks likely, we will be able to keep Police Commissioner Tisch. I won't hold my breath, but I certainly hope it happens. And we need a Manhattan district attorney who will join her or any NYPD to insist that we change cashless bail.
Okay, that brings us to the end of our time. I want to thank the candidates for joining us. A great job, great discussion. That is going to do it for tonight's debate. But you can join us online for an exclusive digital part of this debate where we will get into our lightning round. As a reminder, if you missed any part of the final debate in the race for mayor that was hosted by New York One, you can still catch it on air this Saturday at 1 p.m. and again on Sunday at 8 p.m. Early voting begins tomorrow with polls opening at 9 a.m. Thanks so much for watching and have a great evening. We'll see you next time inside City Hall. Welcome back to Inside City Hall. Thank you for joining our digital portion of this debate in the race for Manhattan District Attorney. It is time for our lightning round, where each candidate will answer my questions with a brief response, usually yes or no. First question, have you ever been arrested, and if so, for what? Ms. Maron?
No, but you really shouldn't be asking that question.
Mr. Bragg?
No.
No.
Ms. Florence, okay. Mr. Bragg, have you ever been the victim of a crime, and if so, what happened?
Yes, I mentioned in my opening statement, I had a knife to my neck, which at a minimum was a menacing, and I had a semi-automatic weapon put to my head, which any one of a number of crimes I won't elaborate. So yes, I'm no stranger to crime and public safety challenges, which is what led me to a career as a prosecutor.
Ms. Florence?
No, but my husband was sucker punched on the way home from work last year.
Ms. Maron?
I've been a victim of theft crimes in the city.
Okay. Ms. Florence, name a legal hero of yours.
Robert Morgenthau, that's an easy one.
Ms. Maron?
In terms of in this job interview, I'd have to say Robert Morgenthau as well.
Okay. Mr. Bragg?
Preet Bharara, my old boss.
Okay. Ms. Maron, do you have a favorite movie or TV show about the law?
Oh, a favorite movie or TV show about the law? Well, when I was a legal aid lawyer, I tried to watch The Wire, and I couldn't stand it because it reminded me of day-to-day life too much. But after I left legal aid, I started watching it, and it's a brilliant TV show.
Very good.
I'm going to go old school, New York Undercover.
Oh, yeah, that is.
Law and Order, obviously.
Law and Order, okay. Mr. Bragg, what is your favorite way to get around Manhattan?
Train is the way I've traveled most of my life.
Okay, Ms. Florence.
I'm scared to take it, but I do take it, the subway.
Okay, Ms. Maron.
I'm a subway rider.
Okay. Ms. Florence, what's your favorite Manhattan restaurant?
Ooh, my favorite Manhattan restaurant, I think I'm just basic. I like John's Pizza of Bleecker.
Okay, Ms. Maron.
Estancia, Argentine restaurant in Tribeca.
Mr. Bragg.
If we're going to go pizza, I'm going to again go old school, Coronet Pizza.
Oh, very interesting. Now, Ms. Maron, have you been to a legal cannabis shop and bought something there?
No, I'm a wine drinker.
Okay. Mr. Bragg?
No.
Ms. Florence?
No.
Okay. Mr. Bragg, is there a law that you would like to see changed? Which one?
I very much would like to see the legislature pass our law on trafficking and do away with the statute of limitations. We have cases we could bring both sex trafficking and labor trafficking. It is very challenging to talk to survivors and say we cannot bring charges because of the statute of limitations.
Ms. Florence.
And I said it before, we need to have discretion back in bail, and we also need to add a dangerousness standard because you can't have two systems of bail, two buildings away from the DA's office, having a dangerousness standard and not in Manhattan.
Ms. Maron.
I agree with Ms. Florence.
Okay. And then finally, did you always want to be a lawyer, Ms. Florence?
No, I wanted to be a singer, but I figured out after one semester as a music major that I did not have the talent to support myself.
This wouldn't be a good time to ask you for a sample then. Ms. Maron.
No, I didn't grow up wanting to be a lawyer, but law school is the last resort for people who don't know what they want to do in life.
Amen.
I knew early after the gunpoint incidents I talked about, I knew that I wanted to focus on those issues.
Okay. Thanks very much, candidates. That is going to do it for this digital portion of the debate. Thanks so much for joining us.